Well, hello and an extremely warm welcome to my channel. My name is Louise and I love waffling on about books. Now, I had a very significant birthday recently and I decided that I would spend part of that birthday reading because it's what I absolutely love to do. It's my idea of heaven. And I have a book here which I kept back for the sort of right moment to read because I had a feeling that I was going to get on with it really, really well. I've read a couple of other books by this author and really enjoyed them. And there was something about the blurb on this book that made me think that it was going to be a me kind of book. And it is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. Isn't that just a beautiful volume? I'd actually had it for about a year, I guess, waiting on my bookshelf for the right moment. And this book absolutely blew me away. It's really difficult to encapsulate, actually. I mean, every novel for me holds a kind of world, within it. But this novel, the scope of it is huge. And actually, although it's, this is a hardback version, so it's quite a chunky tome, it's not a massively long novel. And yet there is so much in it that I know I'm going to find it quite difficult to talk about. And I know there's an awful lot of love out for this novel as well. I've seen a lot of adulation for it online and absolutely quite rightly too. So I did approach it with a little bit of nervousness because when a book's been deeply loved by many readers, you kind of, you don't want to, I don't know, it's like when you go to see a film that everybody's talked about and has been really hyped and then you're disappointed. So I did there was a little bit of trepidation when I opened this book. But I just think I think it's a masterpiece actually in many ways. It's not totally flawless, I don't know whether, yes, I do think there's such a thing as a perfect novel. But what I would say is perhaps this is sort of the perfect novel for me, which sounds a bit egocentric, but it there were times when I was reading this that I almost thought like the novel had been written specifically for me. So anyway, it follows three different narratives, I suppose. In fact, you could argue four. There is the story of King Arthur of the Sewers, which sort of begins, I think, in about 1840. He is born by the Thames in quite awful, appalling conditions, and born into horrendous poverty. And through the fact that he has this incredible memory, he can remember his birth. And it's completely plausible the way that's written about. I don't know whether there are people who can do that. I know some people can visualize things and so on. So he's really fascinating. And because he has this amazing memory, he learns to read. And it's through his memory and his knowledge and his love of books and printing that he starts to, for want of a better phrase, better himself. And there's a kind of avenue, a route out potentially, and I say potentially, out of his poverty. And he becomes absolutely fixated with ancient Assyrian culture. So the culture that evolved in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia, in something like, I think it was the fourth millennium BC. I might have got my numbers wrong there, but it goes back to the absolute dawn of European and human history. So he becomes fixated with that because he sees this fantastic massive piece of sculpture being taken into the British Museum. And depicted on the sculpture is this mythical creature called a lamassu. And as a boy, he sees this happen. And this is where I'm saying it almost felt like this novel was written for me because, I've had a fascination and visited the British Museum throughout my life over and over. In fact, I was there only a month or so ago. And so the fact that the British Museum is sort of central in this novel, for good or bad, is I just love that. I mean, who doesn't love a museum? so there was all of that going on. There's this fantastic sort of delving into Assyrian history and Assyrian culture. And one of the things that really impressed me about this novel was that it's clear that Elif Shafak, I know she's a Turkish writer writing in England, but you know, so she will. I'm guessing she will have had some prior knowledge about Assyrian culture and Mesopotamia, but she writes about it with the skill and the knowledge of an ancient historian who's been, what I mean by that is a historian of ancient history who's been studying this subject all their lives. I mean, I learned so much in this novel. And actually, it was really strange because my daughter had done a dissertation on ancient Mesopotamia, and had when we went to the British Museum about a month ago, she took me to look at the tablets from Mesopotamia, that the collection in the British Museum. There's a couple of rooms. I would urge you to go if you get the chance to do so. And I had known not very much about the culture, and so having seen that and then reading this book, I've now I'm now sat with a copy of the Oxford Myths of Mesopotamia, and I've been reading the account of the flood, which was written, you know, I don't know, 4,000 years ago or something like that. So this book is one of those books, I think, that sort of sparks off or reignites other interests in the reader, which I always think is the mark of a really good novel. So we've got Arthur's story. We've also got the story of Narin, who is based in Turkey in 2014. She's a young Yazidi girl, so she comes from this really, really seriously oppressed minority community, that can trace their, you know, their heritage right back to the dawn of time, much maligned, and the way that Elif Shafak looks at this minority culture and their treatment over time, because the arc of the novel is so vast. It allows the reader to get a really good understanding of just how unjust and wicked and vile the oppression of this minority is. And therefore, you know, it gets you thinking about the whole idea of oppressed minorities, you know, throughout history and within our contemporary society, most importantly. So she's a young girl. She's got a health condition. She wants to. They start this baptism ceremony, and it's interrupted in the most brutal way, and therefore she and her grandmother make this journey across the war-torn Middle East to get to the place where, I think it's called Leash, where she can then have this baptism that will have even more spiritual resonance for her and her grandmother and the community. And so you've got her story. And then we also have the story of Zulika, who is a hydrologist. So I love that. You've got a female scientist. We don't see enough of those in fiction. And she's living in London. She's just separated from her husband. She's absolutely devastated that her marriage has gone wrong. They haven't been married that long. And she has rented this houseboat on the Thames. So one of the things you'll notice from what I've said, you know, the title of the novel is There Are Rivers in the Sky. And throughout this novel, the whole sort of story of water, and there are these raindrops that fall and they have significance and they refall in different places and hit different characters. And you know, Elif Shafak can write so poetically and so beautifully about, she uses symbolism in a way that is really deft and thoughtful. So this idea of the rivers, so Narin lives by the Tigris initially, so we get the Tigris, we get the Euphrates, we get the Thames flowing through this novel. So water is massively important, but also from an environmental and a political point of view. So this is a novel that makes you think about, you know, water and how it becomes a political issue. So, for example, when one country builds a dam, the process of building that dam can destroy, evidence of prior history, but also it can cause problems for communities upstream and downstream of the dam. So, she looks at that as well, the issues that we have as a contemporary society and the issues that we've had throughout history, about the necessity for communities to have water at their disposal, and how that can lead to huge abuse of power by communities who have it or seek it out. And I love that. And actually, that brings me to the very opening of the novel, because the novel opens in Nineveh, and thousands and thousands of years ago, with a drop of water falling in the library where King Ashurbanipal is sat looking at these tablets. And so we go right back to this really early Assyrian history, and every character in the novel has some connection with Assyria, usually an intellectual or an emotional one. And I really enjoyed that, because what she shows, what Elif Shafak is demonstrating, I think, is that, as a human community, we are still battling the same problems. We think we're such a sophisticated society, but we're still battling the same problems and still failing to solve the same problems that were faced by this king who was existing thousands of years ago, who prided himself on these libraries that he'd built in temples across his empire, and yet was incredibly brutal in the way that he dealt with his enemies. And I think that really highlights we're just the same today. We just dress it up differently. We pride ourselves on our intelligence and our learning and all these things, which is great, isn't it? Except that we don't seem to be able to solve the problem of brutalizing other communities when we want or need something or consider them to be different. So I think this is a book that really, really gets you thinking. And, as somebody who is really, really interested and fascinated by ancient cultures, I just loved and languages. I just loved the part that language plays in this book. We have these clay tablets that Arthur is desperate to be able to translate. We have a tattooist as one of the characters who is doing interesting things with language in her tattoo art. And also, obviously, the issues of communication that exists throughout the novel, the communication of ideas. And I just love the way that Elif Shafak, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with her about this book. I need to look at some interviews that she's done since it was published, because the opening few paragraphs really, really reminded me of Wilfred Owen's Exposure, the First World War poet, because he wrote this poem which involves the elements, particularly the rain and the snow, and the poem is in many ways is a soundscape, and it's about these soldiers who were on a hillside, in the First World War, and they are being exposed to the elements, and actually it's the elements that are going to kill them rather than the enemy. And there's something about the first few paragraphs of this novel that really reminded me of that soundscape. The sounds were very similar, and I found throughout the novel that I was sort of picking up on echoes of other literature that she'd definitely woven in, but I don't know whether that was a conscious or a subconscious thing. There's a scene which was really reminiscent of a scene from Oliver Twist when Oliver asks for more. And actually Dickens is a small character within the novel who actually plays a very, very important part in Arthur's development as a human being. So I found that really wonderful, and I And I have always loved the way that Elif, um, you can tell through reading her books that she grew up in a culture of oral storytelling. There are beautiful lists in this novel, lists of rivers, lists of people, lists of places, lists of whatever it might be, and she just knows precisely how to formulate that list and not, not make it too long, not, to retain the interest of the reader. And those lists almost run like little rivulets through the novel. Lots and lots of wonderful features of oral storytelling that resonate through the book. I just, yeah, I just, oh gosh, um I can't. I've been very lucky enough. I've been lucky enough to meet Elif a couple of times at the Women's Prize award ceremony in London in June, and I'm desperately hoping that she'll be there so that I can just thank her for writing this amazing book. It kept me thoroughly entertained from beginning to end. It's traumatic. It's tragic. It doesn't hold back at all. She confronts all sorts of things. There's the issue of medicine throughout this novel. There's so much in it. I could probably talk about it all day. But as you can see, I absolutely adored it. I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. I just think her novels get better and better and better. Yeah, please let me know in the comments down below if you've read it, if you enjoyed it, or if you didn't. What was it that you weren't sure about? I can sort of see, as I was reading it, I kept thinking, why has she got these three narratives? Why three? Why is Narin's story there? I wasn't always sure. But then as I got closer to the end, I could see exactly why she'd done it. Oh yeah, hurrah. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. I loved it. But please, be very honest about how you felt about it. I can't wait to see from your comments. Thanks to all of you. Take care. Happy reading. Bye.